Hello to everyone. You're all welcome back to our integrated science class. In our previous section, we continued looking at the practical questions and the core biology. All the selected questions we are going through have been loaded onto the WhatsApp page. So if you still haven't downloaded the questions, you are advised to go to the WhatsApp page and get access to the questions. In today's section, we're going to look at the remaining questions, hopefully, and then we close the chapter on core biology practicals. In our last section, we looked at question 20, 21, 22, and 23. Today, we're going to continue by looking at question 24, question 25, question 26, and then question 27. Question 27. So the first question we are looking at is question 24. Now this question is under germination. So it is a diagram showing the two types of germination. Now the question says the diagrams A and B illustrate stages in the germination of two different types of seed over a 6-day period. So study the diagrams carefully and answer the questions that follow. So you have a diagram for A and then that of B. Now the first question, that is question A, says name each of the parts labeled I, V, and VI. So question A is asking us to label the parts I to VI. So you have question A, I, V, and then VI. So the first part, that is the I, is what we call the cotyledon. Cotyledon. The spelling is very important. Or we say seed leaf. So cotyledon. The I is a foliage leaf. The foliage leaf in this case, that's the first set of leaf that develops. So the foliage leaf, or you can say first leaf. And then you have the I as what we call the hypocotyl. The hypocotyl. We also have the epicotyl. That one develops below the soil level. The portion above the soil level, we call it the hypocotyl. And then the IV, that is the radical. Radical, that's the portion that develops into the root system. So when a seed germinates, the portion that grows and develops into the root system is what we call the radical. And then the portion that grows and develops into the shoot system is what we call plumule. So you have the radicle and the plumule. The plumule develops into the shoot system, and the radical develops into the root system. And then the IV is what we call colluctal. And then the last portion, VI, that's a fibrous root system. Fibrous root. Okay, so these are the labeled parts of the diagram as indicated. So the I is a cotyledon, the II is the foliage leaf or the first leaf. And then you have the III as the hypocotyl. We have the IV as a radical, the V as a colluctal, and then the V as a fibrous root. Fibrous root. Question BI, it says tabulate 2 observable differences between the stages in A and B. And the I says state 2 similarities between the stages in A and B. So BI is asking for differences, and then the II is asking for similarities. So for BI, differences. Between the stages in A and B. So you put that in a tabular form. If you are saying that when you ask to state differences, 2, 3 differences, it's advisable you put it in a tabular form. Simply put, that's A and then B. Okay. If you compare the stages in A and B, the first thing you realize that in stage A, or in the case of A, the cotyledon appears above the soil level, but in B, the cotyledon appears below the soil level. So that is one difference. So cotyledon So that is for A. Cotyledon appears above the soil level. For B, the cotyledon appears below the soil level. So that is one difference. Now, what is another difference that you can come up with? if you compare both diagrams, you realize that in A, there is one main root, or there's a tap root, and then with smaller roots attached. But in B, the roots are of same size, so that's why we call it the fibrous root. So yeah, the roots, there is a tap root with other smaller roots attached. Then there's fibrous root system. That's for B. So presence of tap root or main root with other smaller roots attached. And here, presence of fibrous root with similar size. You can also talk about the hypocotyl. So hypocotyl is present in A, but it's absent in B. So the third one, presence of the hypocotyl. And then you have absence of hypocotyl. So those are some of the differences you can observe in terms of diagrams A and B. So one is appearance of cotyledon above the soil level in A, and the appearance of cotyledon below the soil level in B. The A consists of a main root or the tap root with other smaller roots attached. But the B consists of roots of similar size, and that's what we refer to as fibrous root. And then also in A, there's the hypocotyl, but in B, there is no hypocotyl. So that is for the differences in terms of A and B. The I is asking for similarities. So similarities between stages in A and B. Similarities between the stages in A and B. Similarity. So what observable feature is present in A and also present in B? So both have cotyledons or presence of cotyledons. So presence of cotyledon and the presence of roots. So presence of root, presence of cotyledon. If you look at the last stage in B, above the coleoptile, that is a V, we have the foliage leaf. So there's also presence of foliage leaf in B as well as A. So presence of foliage presence of foliage leaf. Okay. Obviously, you can also talk presence of radical because it's a radical that develops into roots, and both of them have the radical. The radical in A is not labeled. That is after 4 days you see the radical developing. It is that radical that actually grows into the root. So you can also talk of presence of radical. But once I've said presence of root, you should know the root develops from the radical. Okay. Question C says, name the type of germination illustrated by each of the stages in A and B. So, as I said in the beginning, we have two types of germination. So, one of the type is what is demonstrated in A, and the other type is demonstrated in B. How do you distinguish between the types of germination? We have a germination in which the cotyledon appears above the soil level or above the ground. And there's one in which the cotyledon remain below the soil level or below the ground. The type of germination in which the cotyledon appears above the ground level or above the soil level is what we call the epigeal germination. And the one in which the cotyledon remain below the soil level or below the ground, we refer to it as the hypogeal germination. So if you compare the observations in A and B, it is in A that the cotyledon is above the soil level. So the germination in A is therefore epigeal germination. For B, the cotyledon remains below the soil level. So it is the hypogeal germination. So for question C, for A, the type of germination is epigeal. I'm saying it's epigeal germination because in A, the cotyledon appears above the soil level. And for B, it is called hypogeal germination. Hypogeal germination. It is hypogeal germination because the cotyledon remain below the soil level. The soil level. So these are the types of germination. Question D says, explain briefly how the seedlings obtained nourishment during the period. So we are looking at what happened before germination occurs, and then the seedlings begin to grow. During the process of germination, the embryo obtains nutrient from the cotyledon. Food substances are actually, or there's food reserve in the cotyledon. So during the process of germination, enzymes digest the food that is stored in the cotyledon, and then the end products are absorbed by the embryo during development. And then after, in later stage where the seedlings begin to grow, because there is presence of leaves, green leaves, it absorbs sunlight and therefore undergo photosynthesis to obtain food for nourishment. Okay, so the D. So during period of germination, enzymes, digestive enzymes, break down food stored in the cotyledon. And the end products are absorbed by the embryo. Developing embryo for nourishment. During the latter stage, the latter period, when the seedlings begin to grow, they undergo photosynthesis. To prepare their own food for nourishment. Okay, so those are the two ways in which the embryo and the seedlings obtain nourishment. In the germinative stage, leaves have not developed, so it cannot undergo that. Leaves have not developed, and for that matter, there are no seedlings. So it means that photosynthesis cannot occur. The only food or the means by which the embryo that is developing obtain nourishment is through the food reserves stored in the cotyledon. We have digestive enzymes which break down the food stored in the cotyledon, and then the end product of digestion are absorbed for nourishment by the embryo. Now, when germination occurs and seedlings begin to grow, in that case, they have leaves, so they are able to trap sunlight, and then they combine water and carbon dioxide to produce their own food in the process of photosynthesis. So that is how nourishment, the seedlings obtain nourishment during the process. The last question is question E. It says state 4 environmental factors that could affect the growth of seedlings. So environmental factors that could affect the growth of seedlings. So question E. For seedlings to grow and properly develop, they require moisture, that is water. So water. Moisture. They require suitable temperature. Suitable temperature. Suitable temperature. And you also have sunlight. So they need sunlight to undergo photosynthesis to produce their own food. For them to grow, they also need a good soil fertility. So good soil fertility. Can also talk about good soil pH, which is also an ingredient of soil fertility. So these are some factors that will affect the growth of the seedlings. That brings us to the end of question 24. So quickly, we're going to look at question 25. Question 25. Question 25. Now, question 25 is a question under the skeletal system. The skeletal system. The skeletal system. The question says, Figure 3 illustrates bones of the appendicular skeleton in mammals. In fact, we have two types of skeletal system, skeletons. We have the axial skeleton. So there is the axial skeleton. And then you have the appendicular. So you have the axial skeletal system and then the appendicular skeletal system. The axial skeletal system consists of the skull, and then the vertebral column. The vertebral column is the same as the backbone. So you have the skull, that's the bone in the head, and then you have the backbone. That's the vertebral column. That's the axial skeleton. The other skeletons consist of the arm, the leg, all those ones form part of the appendicular skeletal system. So the question says, the figure illustrates bones of the appendicular skeleton in mammals. So study the figure carefully and answer the questions that follow. So we have three sets of diagrams. Diagram A, B, and then C. Question A says you should identify each of the bones A, B, and C. You are supposed to identify the bones A, B, and C. So for question A, you have to identify A, B, and C. Now the A is what we call the scapula. The scapula, or the shoulder blade. So the bone found in the shoulder. The shoulder. That's what we call the scapula. So A is the scapula. Or you can say shoulder blade. The shoulder blade. So that's the scapula. And for part of the scapula, okay, so that is A. You'll be looking at the label parts later. That is in B. Now the B, the bone illustrated in B, that is the humerus. So the bone found in the, so the arm is divided into two. The lower arm from the elbow to the fingers, that is the lower arm. And then from the elbow to the shoulder, that is what we call the upper arm. So the upper arm is also known as the humerus. So the bone there, the bone in the upper arm is what we call the humerus. The humerus. So we have the humerus. Humerus. Or as I say, you can call it the upper arm bone. Upper arm bone. Sorry, the humerus is rather the C, so it's the C that is the humerus. So the humerus is the C. The B is rather the bone in the lower arm. So we have the lower arm. Bone. The lower arm bone. And then the upper arm bone is the C. So humerus, or we call it the upper arm. Okay. So A is the scapula, the shoulder blade, the bone found in the shoulder. The B is the bone found in the lower arm. That is from the elbow to the palm, or to what we call the wrist. From the elbow to the wrist, the bone over there is what we call the lower arm bone. The lower arm bone, or sometimes we also call it forearm. The lower arm is also known as the forearm. So instead of saying lower arm bone, you can also say the forearm bone. Forearm bone. The lower arm bone is the same as the forearm bone. So the bone from the elbow to the wrist, it actually consists of two bones. That's what you can see. So we have two bones labeled in B. We'll be looking at the naming later. Then we have the bone from the elbow to the shoulder. From the elbow to the shoulder. It is found in the upper arm. So we call it the upper arm bone. Upper arm bone, which we also refer to as the humerus. The humerus. So that is for question A. The B is asking us to label the part from I to VII. So you have I, V, VI, VII. The I part the eye part, we have the eye and eye, which are part of the scapula. The eye is what we refer to as the glenoid cavity. Glenoid cavity. So that is where the humerus is attached to the shoulder. So where the upper arm bone hinges onto or attaches to in the shoulder blade is what we call the glenoid cavity. And then we have ii, it is all the metachromium process. Chromium process. In some books, you also come across acromium. The met doesn't come, so you come across acromium process. If you write that, you'll be given. So it is metachromium process. You can simply write acromium process. Then the II, up to VI are labeled part of the lower arm bone. The lower arm bone. Now the III part is what we call the olecranon process. Olecranon process. Olecranon process. Olecranon process. And then we have the IV, which we call the sigmoid notch. The sigmoid notch, that is a cavity into which the upper arm bone, the humerus, faces. So where the upper arm faces into the lower arm, that's what we call the sigmoid notch. And then we have the V and the VI. If you look at the V and the VI, there are two sets of long bones, but you can see that the VI is slightly longer than the V. So there are two bones that make up the lower arm bone. We have the radius, and then we have the ulna. The radius and the ulna. Now, the one of these two bones, the one that is slightly longer, is the ulna. So if you compare the V and the VI is slightly longer than the V. So your VI is the ulna, and then the V is the radius. So you have the radius, and then the VI as the ulna. Now the VII and the VII are labeled part of the humerus. Now the VII is what we call the shaft. And then the VIII is what we call the trochlea. Okay, so those are the labeled parts. If you look at the diagram, you have something. This part is not labeled. In case you are supposed to label this part. That's the head of the bone. And then this, we call it the trochanter. Trochanter. And then this is actually the head. Okay. So that's for the labeled part. The C, question C says, she states the location in the mammalian body where each of the bones A, B, and C is found. So I've already, from the name C, can also come out with their location. So the scapula is found in the shoulder. The lower arm bone obviously is found in the lower arm. And the humerus, which we call the upper arm bone, that is found in the upper arm. So for bone A, that is found in the shoulder. The B is found in the lower arm. You can say the forearm. And then the C is found in the upper arm. Okay, so that is for the locations. The D, it says state one observable characteristic feature H of bone A, B, and C. So we are looking at observable feature for bone A, observable feature for B, and observable feature for bone C. So let's look at some observable features of bone A. So for bone A, you can see the upper part, it's triangular in shape. So one, it is triangular in shape. Then two, there is presence of glenoid cavity. That's the label part, I, and also there's presence of metachromium process. Okay, so you're supposed to write one. Then let's look at observable features of B. If you look at B, as I said, it consists of two long bones. So it consists of two long bones with one slightly longer than the other. So I've explained that the one that is slightly longer is the ulna, and the one that is shorter is the radius. What else can you see? There is also presence of the sigmoid notch and a presence of the olecranon process. So presence of presence of olecranon process. And last one, observable features of C. observable features of C. So for C, it has a round head, there is presence of a shaft, long shaft. So presence of a long shaft. There's also presence of the trochlea. Okay, so those are the observable features of C. The last question here, that's question E. Question E says, name the type of joint in a mammalian body formed by bones A and C. Bones A and C. So bone A is found in the shoulder, and the bone C is found in the upper arm. So the question is asking about the joint, the name of the joint that is formed by the bone in the upper arm and then the bone in the shoulder. So the bone in the upper arm, that's the bone, the joint formed between the humerus and then the scapula. And that joint, we call it the ball and socket joint. The ball and socket joint. That is what permits movement in the circular or permits circular movement. So you can rotate your arm in a circle because of the joint between the humerus and the scapula. That joint, we call it the ball and socket joint. So for bones A, bones A and C, we call it ball and socket joint. Ball and socket joint. So that joint is found in the shoulder. The ball and socket joint is also found in the hip. So those are the two locations of the ball and socket joint. It is found in the shoulder and then also in the hip. In the hip. So that is why you can rotate your hip more or less in a circular form. So ball and socket joint. Then you also have RI. The joint formed between bones B and C. Bone B is the lower arm, and then bone C, the bone in the lower arm, and then bone C is found in the upper arm. So where the upper arm bone and the lower arm bone join, that is the elbow. So you are looking at the type of joint at the elbow. The name of the joint at the elbow, we call it the hinge joint. Hinge. Hinge joint. So the hinge joint is found in the elbow, and it is also found in the knee. In the knee. So your elbow is similar to your knee. So the joint in the elbow is the same as the joint in the knee, and we call it the hinge joint. I told you the joint in the shoulder and the one at the hip, that's what we call the ball and socket joint. There is also a third type of joint, which we call the gliding and sliding joint. Gliding and sliding joint. That is found in the wrist. The wrist this side, as well as in your ankle. In the ankle. The wrist and the ankle. So we take note of that. So let me put this as notes. So ball and socket joints. This is found in the shoulder and Then we have the hinge joint. Which is found in the elbow and knee. And then we also have the gliding or sliding joint. That one is found in the wrist. So in the wrist and ankle. Okay, so those are the locations of the various joints found in the body. So that closes the or that brings us to the end of question 25. Our next question is question 26. Question 26. This is a question under the skin. Under the skin. The mammalian skin or the human skin. So the question says, figure 4 below illustrates a vertical section of the human skin under two different environmental conditions, A and B. So when you talk of environmental conditions, then we're referring to cold weather and then hot weather. Okay. The question says, study the figure carefully and answer the questions that follow. So you have the two diagrams, A and then the B. So it is the same skin, but then we have different features illustrated in A and different features also illustrated in B. Question A says, name the parts labeled I, and then IV. So question A, we are labeling the parts I to IV. So you have I, and then IV. Now the eye is pointing to the second part of the skin, which we call the dermis. So the lower part of the skin, which we call the dermis. Now, the part above the dermis, the one that appears shaded or darkened, that one is what we call the epidermis. So that's the upper part of the skin. epidermis. If you can see, the epidermis is divided into 3 layers. The upper layer, which is very thin, we call it the Malpighian layer. So this is divided into 3. Malpighian. We have the Malpighian layer. So this is divided into 3. Let me rewrite this. So 1, the Malpighian layer. Then we also have the conified layer. And then we also have the stratified layer. So those are the various parts of the epidermis. Okay, so those are the upper parts of the skin. That is the epidermis. As I said, it's divided into 3 layers. Malpighian, stratified, and then a conified layer. And then the middle one, the lower layer is what we call the dermis. So that is the eye. And then we have eye as a sensory nerve. Or simply you can just say nerve cell. So sensory nerve. Then the eye is the sweat gland. And then the IV is the capillary. Capillary, or you can say blood vessel. So capillary or blood vessel. Okay, so that is actually AI. I says you should give the function of the part labeled I. So function of the part labeled I. That's the dermis. You can see that it is in the dermis that you have the nerve cell. There is sweat gland. You have the capillary. You have the capillary. But in the dermis, we also have what we call the adipose tissue. I talked about adipose tissue when we were looking at fats and food and nutrition. I told that lipids, excess lipids, is stored in adipose tissue. Adipose tissue. And these adipose tissue are found in the dermis. So it contains adipose tissue for storage of excess fats and oil. Of excess fats. And because it stores excess fat, it helps in insulation. You can also say it helps in insulation of the body against heat loss. Then the function of the part labeled II. The II is the sensory nerve. So that's for receiving stimulus. So if your body is responding to changes in the environment, what dictates the changes or the stimulus is the sensory nerve. So for receiving stimulus and transmission of impulses. So for receiving stimulus and transmission of impulses. So when you're feeling a pain in the skin, when someone pinches you and you feel a pain, you step on a sharp object, you feel a pain. It's a result of the stimulus and the transmission of the sensory nerve. Okay. You're also supposed to give the function of the part labeled IV. IV. So the blood vessel is for transmission of blood, or transport of blood containing oxygen and nutrients. For transport of blood containing oxygen and nutrients to the skin. Okay. So that is for question A. Question B says that state two observable differences between the skin in A and skin in B. So B, observable differences between skin in A and skin in B. Skin in A and skin in B. So you put that in a tabular form. So you have A and then B. Now, what are some of the differences you can see? If you compare both diagrams, you realize that the hair on the surface of the skin in A is standing erect or upright, but the hair on the surface of the skin in B is lying parallel, or is lying flat on the surface of the skin. So that is one difference. So hairs are standing upright, or you can say erect. And here, hairs are lying flat. What is the other difference? You have the other difference you can talk about is that if you look at, I've labeled the part labeled II as the sweat gland. The sweat gland is what is responsible for producing sweat. So if you look at the sweat gland in A, from the sweat gland, it leads to the sweat pore, which appears on the surface of the skin. So from the sweat gland in A, you can see, if you follow the sweat pore onto the surface, you can see that there is sweat on the surface of the skin. But if you look at the case of B, you can't see any sweat coming out from the sweat pore on the surface of the skin. So that is another difference. So formation of sweat. So formation of sweat. Here, no formation of sweat. And then lastly, if you look at the blood vessel or the capillary, you can see that in A, the blood vessel is thicker. But in the B, it appears thinner. So we say that in A, the blood vessel has dilated. That is, there's increase in its lumen. But for B, the blood vessel has constricted. That means there is narrowing of its lumen. So, dilation of blood vessel. And then we have constriction of blood vessel. And so these are the three differences you can come out with from the diagram. You are supposed to give two. And the CI, question CI, it says that suggests each of the environmental conditions in A and B. So earlier I told you that when I talk of environmental conditions, we're referring to the hot weather and then cold weather. So from the underlying features or characteristics for A and B, it gives indication that what is observed in A is for hot weather. Even from the fact that there is formation of sweat, it indicates that the weather was hot. So A is for hot weather, and B, since there was no formation of sweat, it means that the weather was cool. The weather was cool. And also, it is when the weather is hot, that is when the blood vessel, which transport blood to the skin, it dilates, it increases in size, so that more blood carrying heat can reach the skin. Then the excess heat will be lost from the skin. In that process, the temperature of the body will come down. And then when the weather is cold, the blood vessel constricts, it reduces in size, so that blood that is being sent to the skin will be minimal. By so doing, you only have a small amount of heat being sent to the skin, so you don't have a lot of heat being lost from the body. So these two, the fact that there's formation of sweat and there's dilation of the blood vessel in A indicates that the condition there is hot weather. And then the opposite holds for B, that is cold weather. So this is hot weather. And then you have the cold weather. And then the I says you should give one reason for the answer in I. So the reason why we are saying that the condition in A is hot weather, I've already explained. So for A, because of what? Formation. So the reason is formation of sweat and you can write, they say one, so you can, but I'm giving it two. You can write dilation of the blood vessel. And then for B, we're referring to the condition as cold weather because of there is no formation of sweat and constriction of the blood vessel. Okay, so those are the reasons. Now, if you take a critical look, you realize that I didn't talk about the first difference that I spoke of. Hairs are standing upright and hairs are lying flat. In fact, for me, I see that there's actually an error in this diagram. Because in cold or in hot weather, the hair actually lie flat. So in hot weather, hair does not stand erect. The hair lie flat. The hair lie flat. It is in cold weather that the hair actually stand upright. The reason why the hair stand upright or erect in cold weather is that it allows for air to be trapped around the pores so that it will insulate the body against heat losses. So that is why in cold weather the hair stand erect so that a layer of air will be trapped around the hair and then insulate the body against heat loss. So in this diagram, that's the source of error. But if you are saying that A, for these two, it shows that the A is hot weather. So if A is actually for hot weather condition, then the hair should rather be standing flat. And then if B is for cold weather, then the hair in B should be standing erect. So please take note of that. So it is because of these two reasons, these two observations, that's why I'm saying that the condition in A is for hot weather, and then the condition in B is for cold weather. But if you're supposed to focus on this one, then the condition in which the hair stand erect is for cold weather, and the condition in which the hair lie flat on the surface of the skin is for hot weather. So that ends question 26. Quickly, we're going to look at the last question, question 27. So the last question we are looking at is question 27. Question 27. Question 27. Now the diagram in question 27 illustrates the process of fertilization. So you can talk of fertilization in mammals or fertilization in flowering plants. So the question says that the figure below illustrates a biological process in the pistil of a flower. So that is a flowering plant. So the process is occurring in a flowering plant. Question A says you should name the parts labeled I to X. I to X. So question A, we're labeling the part from I to X. So the I is the pollen grain. So I is the pollen grain. And then the I is the stigma. The stigma. The I is the star. The IV is a pollen tube. The V is the male gametes. And then we have the, oh, no, that's not it. The V is the ovary. The label part I was labeling rather X. The V there is the ovary. The ovary. The VI is the oval. Or I can say the embryo sac.